One of the biggest pitfalls facing independent artists, content creators, YouTubers, whatever you want to call people that do stuff on their own, one of the biggest pitfalls that they face is one word: grind. It's a word that everyone has said and heard a million times over, and yet everyone misunderstands, at least I think, or taking it to a completely unhealthy extreme, which would not be surprising to anyone. But the issue comes from not understanding how the mind works. There's a wonderful book by, I believe, Johann Harris. I probably got the name wrong. I will post a link to it in the description. It's called Stolen Focus, and it's about how our attention has degraded or shifted over the years, the different influences and consequences of that. And the chapter I'm on right now is pointing out the fact that a form of attention is not what they call spotlight attention. Like, you think about like your focus, your grind, you honing your attention, you're just putting blinders on or a spotlight on one thing that you want to just go all in on, and that's it. But in order to have that kind of sustained attention, in order to achieve your goals, you also have to just not focus on any one thing at all and to let your mind wander. Mind wandering is incredibly important for, connecting dots in your mind to process what you have read, watched, thought about, heard, argued about, learned. Let your mind absorb that, process it, and make neural connections and creative connections between those things and whatever else is going on in your mind. And that is where true creativity comes from. It's not putting on blinders and putting your, working your hands to the bone and forcing something to pop out of your brain as quote unquote creative. It's creativity is the connections between the things already in your mind and letting that happen and then producing something from that. Yes, but you need that space and that flexibility and that kind of aimlessness at times in order for your mind to build those connections and to really have some of its best ideas. And that's not to say you can't do creative work by working, 9 to 5 every day and grinding it out, but you're not going to do your best work and you're not going to have the best time without allowing some breathing room in your mind. And I think this really is perpendicular, I would say, to YouTube culture, where everyone harps on consistency and grinding it out, and even if you don't feel like it, making X numbers of videos per month or whatever. And you'll notice I've gotten a little lax on this series. It's still my goal. It is still a goal. A goal is not a law, a hard rule that you have to adhere to or bad things happen. A goal is just a thing you are working towards and aiming at. And so my goal is to have this series, Liminal Musings here on Lost Saves, a weekly series that releases on Saturdays about my thoughts and my introspections and whatever, played over top of gameplay. I'm not always gonna make that. I'm not always gonna do it every week. Sometimes there's just enough going on, and I need the space to let my brain breathe and think before I have anything worthwhile to say, and that's okay. Like, yeah, I don't want to get in the habit. You gotta avoid building bad habits of skipping out multiple weeks in a row and just abandoning it altogether. And it's really easy to fall into that trap. But it's also, I think, even easier in some ways to fall into the trap of overworking towards something without allowing yourself room to really evaluate what you're doing and if it's worth it and whether it's working or not and that kind of thing. And I look back on my older videos, both on my original gaming channels and on my main channel, which was originally a gaming channel, and a bunch of stuff. And I think that was one of the big things I did wrong. Like, a lot of it, I was still very early, learning, exploring, blah, blah, blah. I can't be too hard on myself for being in the learning process and discovering myself and my expression in this art form. But I think a big thing that I kind of forced myself to do was to upload basically all the time, even though I didn't always have something to say. And it's funny because when I think about my older videos I make, I think about some highlights where I had something I wanted to say and I got it out in a commentary. And even if the video was low quality because I was still a noob at it, it was still meaningful to me. But actually looking back at all the still public videos, there was just so much noise. And it's okay if you're making noise, especially if you're still learning how to edit, learning how to record, learning how to present. Like, you're not going to produce great works of art, for any art medium right off the bat every time. And that's totally fine. But there is a lot that I posted that was purely there because I felt like I needed to post and that I was trying to force myself. I was squeezing my brain like a lemon trying to get the juice out instead of allowing my mind time to think about things, to process what was going on, and to actually have something worthwhile to say or to formulate my words in a way that felt worthwhile. Because a lot of the time, especially with how busy I was in, late high school, early college, I was doing a million different things. And so I would come home from school and have a small block of time before anyone else got home. And often that was the time where I just churned out a video. Didn't matter what it was. I just sat down and recorded. And again, that's great practice. You got to get your 1,000 videos in or whatever. Like, that's fine. But in terms of doing it now, and this is the issue of advice catered towards newbies versus people doing things a while. It is very hard to really segment which advice you should be listening to and who should be listening to what advice. That is a hard thing to grapple with. And a lot of people who have been doing their art form or their craft or whatever a long time still listen to advice mostly catered to newbies. And this would be one of those situations, because if you've already figured out the basics, then no, I would never tell you to just force yourself to make a bunch of videos for the sake of it, because you're not going to be happy in the long run with your efforts. And you would have produced something a lot better by allowing yourself to sit and think about it and really deal with it over time rather than all at once. Grinding is an important discipline to learn, and to learn when to apply it when it's necessary. Grinding is not the answer to success, the universal thing you should be doing all the time. Leisure time is just as important as grind time when it comes to really doing good work, just mechanically or from a skill or business perspective, but also creatively, to having creative thoughts and powers. If you've ever taken a shower or been on a walk or went to lay down for bed and suddenly you had the bright idea, or you had a cool project you wanted to work on, or you really solved that thing you were trying to figure out which direction you wanted to take it in. That is your brain finally getting a break and actually processing through and making those connections. And that cannot happen if you don't allow yourself time to let your mind wander and do things. And for me, it's really exciting. There are often times where I get an extra work day because my kid's getting babysat by my parents or something. And I will often, unless I have big deadlines hitting me, at which point that is the time to grind, I will take that time and I will make those work days leisure days where I just aimlessly wander amongst the projects I have, and whatever feels good or ends up working out, if I end up working on something, that's great. Or I make progress towards creative decision making or learning new skills. And so just recently, the thing that I accomplished was I finally watched some Ableton tutorials because I've been wanting to make some new music projects for some other videos and possibly for our backing track music label for you to use in videos and streams. And I wanted to make this ambient soundscape thing. And then the night before, I started having this vision of a video and music thing I'm going to do with these clips from this Bjork video from forever ago about CRT TVs and this big analog experience. And I really wanted to make this. And I spent the first few hours of that day bashing my head against the wall trying to learn the UI of the software. And it was an utter nightmare. And then I took a break. I had some lunch. I came back to it. And I had one of the deepest, most hyper-focused flow states I've had in a long time. And it was only a couple hours out of the whole day. But that's all I needed. That's all that by allowing myself to float around and to try this with relatively low stakes and just spend the day exploring these things. Once I entered that flow state, once things clicked, I produced something that I'm really freaking stoked on. And I'm impressed with, given my complete lack of experience. And I'm hoping I'll be able to spin it into multiple other things. And the track I made wound up, because I was so focused, I didn't actually zoom out and realize how long this thing was. I wound up making a 9-minute track. For something that needs to be a 3-minute video, that's not going to work. I think for the album that it's for, that'll be fine. But I need to make a second copy and really condense it down into like 3 minutes at most. All that to say, I would not have gotten there if I did not allow myself a day like that, where it wasn't grinding at my to-do list, but rather wandering amongst my ideas and my inspirations. It is absolutely crucial. So I just want to instill that upon you. Not every waking hour has to be grinding at your small business or your freelancing gig or your entrepreneurship. You need time to just sit and have the big ideas. Or what the heck are you grinding at? Hope you enjoyed. Go check out this video on what I was grateful for last year, I guess, because a bunch of y'all were commenting on that recently out of nowhere. And yeah, remember to be kind, rewind.